Alright, so hey everyone, today I want to take a look at the dead zones for RoboCop Rogue City. This is being demonstrated on the Xbox Series X in case it differs on other platforms. But to jump into it, we have for the movement a 25% axial dead zone. And because of the shape, you have to move the stick further to start seeing movement diagonally. Axial dead zones restrict diagonal movement along the axes, the size of the dead zone. So as you can see that I'm bobbing the stick around the vertical axis and I'm moving perfectly horizontally. In this case, perfectly to the left, to the right. Move at very obvious angles, say right past the dead zone, almost 45 degrees, and I'm moving perfectly forward, perfectly backward. You only start seeing diagonal movement once you break out of both axis dead zones, which is represented by the screen region. So again, very obviously diagonally, but once you move into the diagonal region, or out of both axis dead zones, you start moving diagonally. I didn't formally test the movement curve, but there is a full gradient of movement speeds available. So your slowest speed, there's a smooth transition up to your fastest movement speed. The sprint threshold is the shaded region. So if your stick is under this region, you can try toggling a sprint, but nothing will happen. But if you move the stick past about 62.5%, we'll be able to toggle a sprint. And if you fall below this threshold, you'll fall out of it. The exact shape of this threshold doesn't matter too much because most players are probably going to be pushing their stick fully. And in that case, only sort of the angular range of this matters. So you can see that I'm just sliding stick fully around the edge of the stick range. And you have a little over 90 degrees to be able to trigger a sprint in. You can see that if I start sprinting right below or right above the sprint threshold, I'm sprinting, but it's quite slow. But if I push the stick further, I start sprinting faster. So sprint is more a modifier for the underlying curve. So, and if the speed isn't enough, you can see it pretty clearly change with the bloom on the crosshair. But for the camera, we have the same 25% axial dead zone. And the same restriction. So you can see that I'm bobbing right around the vertical axis, and I'm moving perfectly to the left, perfectly to the right. You only start seeing diagonal movement once you break out of both axis dead zones. And this is easiest to see when capping the view perfectly up or down and looking for horizontal movement. And this would be diagonal movement if it wasn't capped. So, demonstrate that here. Some diagonal movement, perfectly up, diagonal movement. The acceleration curve is linear, so it just increases linearly up until about 88.7 or 8%, and then there's a large jump in speed, and then increases linearly till the end of stick movement. The shaded region represents that jump, turn speed, and you can see that it's a flat threshold within this dead zone. But when you move into the diagonal sections, you can see that it's warped inward. It's got a sort of slightly curved shape. And this acceleration jump is separate for each axis. So only this vertical threshold right here, passing this only accelerates the horizontal axis, and this threshold right here only accelerates the vertical axis. Now this can be an issue because this can affect diagonal movement, because let's lower the sensitivity to really make this a little easier to demonstrate. So if I move at this angle, you can see the direction the crosshair is moving. But if I move further into the horizontal region, you can see it lurched a bit horizontally, and it's actually a slightly shallower angle. And again, for this direction, move a little forward, and it moved a little more horizontally. In this case, same thing, but a little closer to the vertical, into the vertical range, and it's slightly more vertically once we hit this acceleration region. And that's simply because the vertical or horizontal portion of the angles are being multiplied separately, and that's shifting the angle towards the more sensitive axis. The overlap of these is when both axes are being accelerated at the same time, and this doesn't affect your diagonal angle because they're both being accelerated at the same time. So this would be the same angle as this would be. So these are separate per axis, and actually this warp shape seems to be a general application across the entirety of the stick input, at least outside of the dead zones. Normally, this acceleration jump threshold should be perfectly straight all the way across the stick range. However, it being curved in seems to be that they're multiplying each axis by how far along you are on the other axis. And the potential reason they're doing that is if these were flat thresholds, there'd actually be a range. You can see that my thumbstick can move past this more further diagonally than this graph shows, but it can't move to the pure corners of the square module, and that would make it so that I wouldn't be able to access these acceleration regions, which would make it so that I wouldn't be able to access either the horizontal or vertical acceleration zones, which would make diagonal movement significantly slower than the cardinal movements. So what their solution seems to have been is to multiply the axis by how far along the you are on the other one. So for example, if this is the horizontal axis, I'm just moving the stick along this, and this is unaffected right here, so this from the dead zone to this acceleration jump range, for example, we can see that it's this range. But as we move further up, like this would be your normal horizontal range from 0 to 100%. But as you move up further, the horizontal axis is being multiplied up to 2 times once you move to the maximum vertical. And the reason I think this is the speed right below the acceleration jump is actually the same. This is the same as this, the region right before the jump here. So this whole axis is being multiplied as you move higher vertically or lower vertically. And the same is happening for the vertical axis, the further along the horizontal you're going. And me just moving the stick around and describing this isn't terribly helpful. I'll have a graph on screen to demonstrate this since I've been able to replicate it. But what this ends up doing is makes your diagonal movement much faster than it should be. For smaller movements, this won't be too noticeable, but as your stick movements get larger, the faster diagonals become much more apparent. And you can see that again, my stick doesn't move too much outside of this graph, but if I was able to move at 100% horizontal and 100% vertical, your perfect diagonal turn speed could be up to about 2.8 times faster than the cardinal. Ideally, many games with excess diagonal movement will normalize that. So if your stick is moving over 100%, it will just treat that as 100%, but that's not the case here. So we have faster diagonals in general, but also uncapped, so it can go again up to 2.8 times faster than normal. So your diagonals are all faster than expected. Additionally, this does slightly warp the diagonal movement. It actually biases it slightly away from the closer axis, but this is relatively small and certainly doesn't warp it as much as the axial dead zone. So that's not too big an issue, but is one thing on top of the faster diagonals. But as far as the sensitivity, I'll show the tested sensitivity ranges on screen, but one of the big things is that the vertical sensitivity seems about 50% of the horizontal, and aside from just being slower, that having different axis sensitivities makes your diagonal movement, or alters your diagonal movement. So for example, at this same values, the vertical sensitivity is slower, and if I move the stick at about 45 degrees, it's not too clear from this, but the crosshair or the crosshair movement is slightly shallower than it should be. And this will be much more obvious when we make an extreme example with the same stick movements. So I'm moving at about 45 degrees with the stick, and you can see that it's very heavily horizontally biased. And like what I showed before with the acceleration jump, this is essentially what it's doing. The horizontal is faster in this case, so it's being biased horizontally. And it's so aggressive that you can see that I have to make extraordinarily vertical movements to even see somewhat diagonal movements. And basically at this extreme, you have perfectly vertical and then diagonal movements really to work with. So ideally, if you want them the same, you should be able to set them the same. But since the sliders are weighted differently, you have to set the vertical sensitivity higher than the horizontal to be able to do so. These sliders are not weighted, or at least don't increment linearly. So the range from 0 to 50 of the sensitivity increase is actually smaller than from 50 to 100. I don't know the exact scale, but at least assuming that the vertical sensitivity is about 50% of the horizontal, and the increase in sensitivity seems to be following a just slightly more than a quadratic curve. that generally matches the sensitivity values I've tested. This makes it so that you really can't play higher than sensitivity, a horizontal sensitivity of 70 and 100 to have the sensitivities be even. And of course, again, to have the point of having them even is to, one, make the sensitivities even, but also to give you correct diagonal movement. So if you want correct diagonal movement and then to be the same, you have to set the vertical sensitivity, and having the slider, the vertical sensitivity slider being weighted slower makes this less intuitive. If they were the same, you could just set them the same. And if many players like lower vertical sensitivities, but and if they were the same, they could simply set it lower. But I'll have the tool linked in the description to at least approximately look at this. You should take the numbers with a grain of salt because vertical tests are a little inaccurate, and the nonlinear scaling definitely doesn't help that. But that hopefully that tool is somewhat useful. But I'll keep it to the relative sensitivities I gave. Anyway, the zoom sensitivity seems to be about 40% of your general sensitivity. So your general sensitivity and then your zoom sensitivity. And this seems to be the case for all weapons. I didn't test all of them, but I tested a few of them. And all of them came up at about 40% of your general sensitivity. What players prefer varies wildly, so some may find that this isn't slow enough, and some may find that it's too slow, and they may want it closer to their general hipfire sensitivity. But I think the only issue is that this 40% ADS speed also applies to scoped weapons, and there I think it could be a little too sensitive. That's subjective and just my personal opinion, but I think in general players might want their scope sensitivity to be slower than their ADS. Player preference and all that, but I think that's the only place where it can really feel a little too sensitive. But there is aim assist in this game, and you actually can't disable it. It's forced. And it comes in a few different forms. One is when you aim with your weapon, if you're close enough to a target, it'll snap to their chest. Then there is some slowdown. If your crosshair is close enough to a target, your sensitivity will drop. And the window for this seems massive. You don't have to be anywhere close to a target for it to slow down, and when moving away from them, it takes quite a while to get out of the window to get back to normal sensitivity. And this may be a little more than slowdown, because at least when using focus, when passing over targets, it can feel like you're actually snagging hard on them, and actually can stop your camera dead when just moving past them. So that aspect of aim assist is very aggressive. I couldn't find an example, or I couldn't notice any tracking, at least when strafing around targets, where in other games it would slightly alter your camera to track them. However, there were situations where enemies would, say, duck into cover, and it would drag my crosshair down with them, but I couldn't find any universal kind of application of that. So aim assist actually is quite aggressive, and I'm not sure exactly how helpful it is in general. But the last dead zone to look at is the map cursor dead zone. And this is a slightly smaller 20% axial dead zone. and it's restricted, but slightly less because the dead zone size is smaller, so 20% around the vertical axis. See that here. The curve for the map cursor is actually, it's linear, however it's scaled to 0%, and the dead zone actually crops the first 20%, so just moving outside of the dead zone has you move at 20% of your total speed, and it would actually be a little faster moving diagonally. And because the input isn't scaled around this dead zone, your subtle diagonals are lost too. You can see that moving just right outside of this into the diagonal range is pretty abrupt. So this is likely eating any of the subtle diagonals within this range. But this is the map cursor, so you really need almost no precision for it, so that doesn't matter too much. It's just not scaled like the movement and the camera dead zones are. So that about covers things. Axial dead zones at 25% are quite common throughout the industry, but not particularly ideal. Larger dead zones affect accuracy in that you have to move the stick dramatically to make small adjustments. The restricted diagonal movement makes it so that your stick, the directions you move the stick are not the directions the camera moved in, so you have to really overcorrect to make the directions you want to make. This specific implementation of the diagonal acceleration is makes the diagonals faster, so they're less consistent than they should be. And the aim assist can seem to hurt more than it helps, and there's no option to disable that. So unfortunately, it's this doesn't control all that well, but that is what it is. So thanks for watching, and everyone have a great rest of your day.